A shadowed figure walks through the narrow, filthy streets of medieval Europe. A long, dark cloak drapes his body. In his hand, a staff to push away the sick, and covering his face, a mask with a long, bird-like beak. He looks like death itself. This is the Plague Doctor, one of history's most haunting symbols. But who were these masked figures really? Were they healers, frauds, or something far stranger? Today, we peel back the beak to uncover the truth behind the Plague Doctors. The 14th century. Europe is collapsing under one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. The Black Death, the bubonic plague, swept across the continent between 1347 and 1351, killing up to 25 million people, nearly a third of Europe's population. The symptoms were horrifying. Fever, vomiting, black swellings called buboes in the armpits and groin. Within days, the infected were dead. Fear was everywhere. Villages abandoned, trade routes silent, mass graves dug in haste. Priests offered prayers, nobles fled to their country estates, and common people turned to superstition. It was in this desperate world that the figure of the Plague Doctor emerged. But here's the truth. The Plague Doctor, as we imagine him today, with his black robe and bird-like mask, didn't fully exist during the first outbreak. That image came later. To understand it, we need to trace the origins. By the early 1600s, Europe was gripped by recurring waves of plague. As panic spread and death tolls climbed, cities and kingdoms took desperate measures. Among them, the hiring of plague doctors. These men were assigned to treat the infected, record deaths, and attempt to control the uncontrollable. But unlike modern physicians, they were not always highly trained. Some were inexperienced young doctors looking to begin their careers. Others were second-rate practitioners with few other prospects. In some cases, they weren't doctors at all, just individuals willing to risk their lives for a paycheck. Their responsibilities varied widely, from examining the sick and documenting symptoms to performing rudimentary and often harmful treatments. They practiced bloodletting, lanced the painful buboes that marked the plague, and attempted herbal remedies rooted in outdated theories. They were expected to maintain death toll records, offer testimony for wills, and act as official witnesses to the devastation. But it was in 1619, in Paris, that a physician named Charles Delorme designed what would become the most infamous medical uniform in history, the beaked plague doctor costume. Delorme's design was meant to protect. Imagine the outfit, a long, waxed coat often made of leather, stretching from neck to foot like a second skin. Gloves, boots, and a wide-brimmed hat completed the ensemble, sealing the body away from exposure. The doctor carried a wooden cane or staff which served several purposes: to examine patients without direct touch, to prod the sick from a distance, or even to push back frantic crowds who feared or demanded their attention. And most famously, the beaked mask. The mask had round glass eyepieces and a long, curved beak protruding outward. Inside, the beak was packed with aromatic defenses, herbs, spices, dried flowers, or vinegar-soaked cloth. Why? Because of miasma theory, the widespread belief that diseases spread through bad air or poisonous vapors. By breathing through fragrant herbs, doctors thought they could purify the air and filter out the plague itself. In reality, the design offered almost no protection against Yersinia pestis, the bacterium carried by fleas and rats. Yet, in a world desperate for solutions, it gave the illusion of armor against an invisible enemy. But the appearance carried unintended consequences. To the sick and dying, the beaked mask was terrifying. The doctor didn't resemble a savior. He looked like a carrion bird, circling above the dying. And that resemblance was no coincidence. The mask echoed the shape of crows and ravens, birds that fed on corpses and were feared in Christian Europe as omens of death. Some historians even suggest that the bird-like appearance may have been deliberately chosen, not only as a filter for herbs, but as a way to intimidate. The mask kept people at a distance, whether out of fear of contagion or fear of the figure itself. The truth? Plague doctors rarely cured anyone. Despite their ominous masks and long coats, their tools were not miracles, but reflections of a world still grasping for answers. Medical knowledge in medieval Europe was rooted in ancient theories, especially the belief in balancing the four humors of the body: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Health, they believed, depended on these fluids being in harmony. Too much black bile might cause melancholy or sickness. Too much yellow bile meant fever or aggression. Illness, including the plague, was thought to come from imbalance, and so treatment aimed to restore equilibrium. Bloodletting was common, opening veins to release sickness. Poultices, mixtures of herbs and bread, were applied to buboes in hopes of drawing out poison. Purging forced patients to vomit or suffer diarrhea, supposedly cleansing the body. In reality, these remedies often weakened already fragile victims. Plague doctors were more valuable as record keepers than as healers. They tracked the spread of infection, documented death tolls, and witnessed wills when whole families perished. For terrified cities, their presence offered not real cures, but psychological comfort, the illusion that something, anything, was being done against the Black Death. Over time, plague doctors developed a sinister reputation. Some were accused of corruption, charging families huge sums for treatments that didn't work. Others were seen as profiteers, taking advantage of tragedy. One famous account from 17th century Rome tells of a plague doctor who was caught looting corpses rather than treating them. Stories like this spread across Europe, amplifying fear. The mask itself, once designed for protection, became a symbol of dread. To glimpse one on the street meant death was close by. Children whispered ghost stories about the Black Bird Man. Adults prayed they would never hear the knock of his staff at their door. The plague doctor became less a savior and more a harbinger of doom. By the 18th century, outbreaks of the plague in Europe began to decline. While the threat of disease had not vanished, advances in medicine, improvements in sanitation, and more strategic urban planning helped reduce the frequency and severity of epidemics. Quarantine measures were more rigorously enforced, and public health systems began to take shape. Crucially, in the mid-19th century, one discovery marked a turning point: the development of germ theory by scientists like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch. This revolutionary idea that diseases were caused by microscopic organisms, not bad air or imbalances of humors, transformed medical understanding and practice. The beaked costume of the plague doctor, once thought to protect against miasmas of disease, was revealed to be ineffective. Designed for a world ruled by fear and superstition, it could not stand against the new age of science. By the 19th century, plague doctors were no longer employed, their methods and tools rendered obsolete by modern epidemiology and microbiology. Today, the plague doctor is everywhere in popular culture, no longer a physician, but a symbol. In Venetian carnivals, stylized plague doctor masks are worn as elaborate costumes, their eerie beaks transformed into works of art. In video games, graphic novels, and films, plague doctors often appear as villains, occult figures, or silent harbingers of death, their image steeped in mystery and dread. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the plague doctor resurfaced, not in hospitals, but in memes. Dark humor turned this medieval icon into a symbol of how humans cope with fear, through satire, symbolism, and reinvention. Cloaked in black, faceless and anonymous, the figure became strangely relevant again, a reminder of our collective vulnerability. The irony is striking. Historically, plague doctors may not have saved many lives. Their gear, based on flawed science, offered limited protection. Yet their image has endured for centuries, outliving kings, kingdoms, and even the Black Death itself. The plague doctor has even crept into literature, appearing in Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of the Red Death, where a mysterious, death-like figure in a mask crashes a masquerade ball. That figure isn't named, but it echoes the same theme. You can't outdance death. The mask remains, and so does the fear. The beaked mask of the plague doctor is more than a piece of clothing. It is a reminder of an age when medicine could not answer death, a reminder of how fear shapes the symbols we carry, and a reminder that sometimes those meant to heal become icons of dread. Behind the beak was not a bird, not a monster, but a human being, someone as fragile as the patients they tried and failed to save. In the end, the plague doctor tells us less about medicine and more about humanity's eternal struggle with mortality, a figure of hope, a figure of fear, and a shadow that still haunts history.